What's up, Tigers? How are you guys doing? I hope life is great wherever you are. This is GRENKE from Spain, and as you guys know, GRENKE Chess Classic just started yesterday in Germany, gathering many top players, including the world champion Magnus Carlsen and many others. So round one didn't disappoint, and there was an excellent and amazing game between Vincent Keymer and Magnus Carlsen. Vincent Keymer, 14 years old, from Germany, who won last year the Open and qualified for this super tournament. An extremely talented young player from Germany was facing in round number one Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. So a big test for the kid, and he gave an extremely interesting fight. So the game was a roller coaster. So let's cut the bullshit and see what happened in the 64 squares between Keymer and Magnus Carlsen. So the German decided to go for g4, and we were expecting Magnus to play something not so usual, right? Because normally these guys play extremely solid lines, but with a difference of 300 points of rating, so he probably has to play something more aggressive, and he did. Or at least something not so theoretical, right? So d4, knight f6, c4, and c5 by Magnus Carlsen. After d5, we were expecting in the broadcast the Benko gambit or even the Benoni after e6, right? But instead, he decided to go for g6, which is not the most played move in this position. So knight c3 by Keymer. Now b5 doesn't make any sense, right? Why? Because I just take with the knight. There's not even a Benko gambit here. This is just bullshit for black. So that's why b5 is not possible anymore, and here Carlsen plays d6. e4 was played by Vincent Keymer, gaining some space in the center, and bishop g7. Magnus develops another minor piece, knight f3 by Vincent Keymer, short castle, bishop e2. And at this point we were all expecting, I guess, e6 in this position, and then after short castle, ed, and now white has the extra option of going e takes d5, which leads to extremely solid positions where it's extremely complicated to create interesting counterplay for the black player here. So Magnus here decided to go for the unusual e5 move, and actually we have transposed to one of the main lines in the King's Indian, where black has played c5 against the Petrosian variation. What am I talking about? Most of you will be asking, right? So let's try to understand what I'm saying. So d4, knight f6, c4. Imagine black goes for the King's Indian, and then we enter in the main line, where after e5, d5, we are now in the Petrosian variation, where normally black plays a5 or knight a6 or even knight h5. But here, this is like if Magnus played here c5. So after e5 here, black is gonna try to create an aggressive attack on the king side by playing some f5 later, and probably white should try to create some counterplay on the queen side, right? After the move b4. So short castle was played by Vincent Keymer, and knight e8. Now Facundo is ready to go for the action, right? So Keymer goes knight e1. This knight on d3 is well placed, right? Because it supports the b4 break, and also it puts a lot of pressure on the c5 pawn. So f5 was played by Magnus Carlsen, and here Keymer decided to take on f5. Another interesting move would be f3, reinforcing the center, right? Now, and after f4, like this gets extremely double-edged. For example, knight d3, white is gonna try to play some b4, and then a4, you go b6 in order to break all your fortress here on the queen side. And now black is gonna try to make you by playing g5, h5, rook f6, rook g6, g4, boom, boom, boom. So that's why maybe Keymer didn't want to go for these kind of positions, and then he took on f5. And then how to take back, with the bishop or with the pawn. This is a mistake that a lot of people make when you guys are starting with chess, or even me. Bishop f5, right? So normally you don't want to take with the bishop here, right? Because now the e4 square would be extremely weak. So now even moves like g4 now interesting, because you have won the fight for the e4 square, and then this bishop is pretty passive, so that's why you don't want to take with the bishop on f5, even though it looks natural because you are developing a piece. You want to control the e4 square. This is extremely important in the King's Indian. And also you have opened the g file for your rook that may be used in the future. Also, now there are interesting alternatives by playing e4 later and then opening this diagonal for this little monster here on g7, and also this e5 square would be vacant for a knight, for example. So here Keymer decided to stop Black's attack on the king side by playing f4, Facundo versus Facundo. And knight d7 was played by Magnus Carlsen. e4 was also interesting here, but knight d7 keeps the tension, is more flexible, and now you maybe want to go for e4 or even e takes f4, because later you will be able to use the e5 square for your beautiful corcel, right? So after knight d7, now knight d3 was played, and now Vincent Keymer is asking Carlsen, you want to take on f4? Alright, you can go ahead, but then after knight f4 your e6 square would be extremely weak, also knight h5 ideas. So that's why Carlsen didn't want to take on f4, but instead he went for e4, attacking this knight, gaining a tempo, and also opening this beautiful diagonal for this bishop. Knight f2 was played by Keymer, and now at this point we could say we were a little bit surprised by the move that Carlsen employed here. He took on c3. The champ is the champ. He knows what he's doing, but of course this is a move that you have to think a lot before playing it, because this bishop is actually a monster here, and after b takes c3, of course you have ruined a white pawn structure, but now white has the bishop pair. So this becomes an extremely unbalanced position. So knight d f6, played by Magnus Carlsen in order to improve this piece, also giving some square for this bishop that can be developed now by a d7. And now bishop e3 was played by Vincent Keymer. This plan after queen e1 was really interesting. So queen e1 in order to go knight d1 and knight e3. The knight on e3 is perfectly placed, right? Because you control d5 and c4. c4 could be one of your weaknesses, and now you are also putting some pressure on f5, and most important, you are getting ready for the break g4. Probably if white wanna create here, contemplate on the king side, it's gonna be related with the move g4 sooner or later, right? Of course it's better to prepare it, but sooner or later you'll have to go for g4 here. Keymer decided to go for bishop e3, bishop d7, sorry, knight g7 was played by Magnus Carlsen, and now queen e1 by the German. Now he decides that he wants to go for this plan, knight d1 and knight e3 later. Carlsen played bishop d7 here, an extremely useful move, as you guys are gonna see here in a minute, because now after the move knight d1, Keymer is ready to go bishop f2, knight e3 and bishop h4. And if you look at the position before with the bishop on c1, this bishop was extremely sad, right? This bishop was bullied in high school, yeah? Everybody was taking his sandwich. But the bishop on h4 is extremely happy. There's a party on h4 and he's a party animal on h4. Everybody wants to dance with this guy. It's in the VIP room. So it's like, it reminds me to these positions in the stone wall, where the bishop from c8 goes all the way to h5, right? Bishop d7, bishop e8, bishop h5. So this is some sort of similar stuff, right? With bishop e3, bishop f2 and bishop h4. And that's why Magnus plays an extremely interesting move, bishop a4. He's saying, you know what, I'm not gonna give you time for this. You go bishop f2, and then I'm gonna capture your knight on d1. And then we'll get an extremely double-edged position where white has the bishop pair, but the position is not opened yet. So the knights could fight pretty well against the bishop pair, right? So here at this point, Keymer decides to go for h3, preparing g4 in the future. Magnus takes on d1, queen takes on d1, and queen e8 by Magnus Carlsen, intending to go queen g6, ready for the action on the king side. And here Keymer goes for the interesting move king f2. He thinks, alright, this king is not gonna be safe if I try to push on my pawns here, so I'm gonna try to bring the king maybe to d2 or even c2, where it's gonna be extremely safe, because for black it's gonna be extremely hard to create counterplay on the queen side, since the move b5 is just impossible to play. and later when my king is safe, I'm gonna bring all my pieces to the king side and then gonna try to open the G file and then kill Magnus Carlsen. So King F2 was played. You go G4 straight away, F takes, H takes, and now for example H5, gaining this square was very interesting for Magnus Carlsen. Let's say G5, Queen G6, and for example after King H2, there's the move Knight F5, and suddenly White is in trouble. So King F2 was played, Queen G6 by Magnus Carlsen. I think the engine was saying G4 in these positions, but it was not human at all. After Queen H6, like it looks like there could be a lot of trouble for White here. It's pretty risky. So that's why Keymer plays the move Rook G1, more natural, protecting G3, and now King H8, A4 by Keymer, Rook G8, and Queen F1. And now Vincent Keymer came out with this plan, which is very interesting. He wants to go G3, maybe bring the queen to G2, maybe bring the queen to H2, where supports F4, which is going to be extremely important, as you guys are going to see in few moves. Because now after Knight F5, you could say, Pepe, come on, I want to play A5, I want to push my beautiful pawn on the A5. No, guys, because there's Queen G3, boom, and then bye-bye, sayonara, baby. It was a pleasure to meet you, but you're not my type. So that's why you have to stop mate on G3, and this is what Keymer did with the move G3. Now Rook A to F8, and Magnus is accumulating a lot of pieces on the queen side, right? But it's not clear how he's gonna make progress here. And now Keymer came out with this idea, which was very interesting. Queen F6 targeting Carlitos. We got Carlitos twins now here in this position. Rook A C1 protecting one of them. And here maybe Magnus Carlsen starts risking maybe too much. Sorry for the background, right? I'm in the studio, and then the rest of the house was busy today, guys. So I'm gonna apologize for this ugly background. I promise I'm gonna fix it in the next game of the day videos. But here Carlsen decided to go for Queen D8. Maybe he wants to create some counterplay on the queen side. Now, given the fact that Vincent Keymer has a lot of pieces on the king side, but now the German decides to go for Queen H2. We have to say that Knight G3 here was extremely interesting, and most of you at home will be saying, what is this Spanish stupid guy saying? I'm just gonna take it. Has no clue about this. What are you talking about, stupid Spanish guy? The thing is, Knight H5 here is very interesting. And now White has two options. White can retreat the queen to H2, or you can take on H5. Well, it looks actually nice, because now you got a lot of pieces for the queen. So Rook takes E3, and now White has two options. You take with the Rook after the move Queen H4 targeting the Bishop, Bishop E2 and Rook G8. It turns out that after Rook C to G1, actually White can't move any of his pieces. You can't move the king since the Rook is hanging. You can't move the Rook just to G2 and G1. And then this bishop has to protect all the time Facundo. So here their position is around equal. Nobody can do anything here. So maybe you could say, okay, then I'm just gonna take with the king and then nothing happens. I'm just gonna hide on H2 and I'm extremely happy here in this position. The thing is, after Rook G8, King H2, Rook G1, it's not easy how to recapture. If you recapture with the king, there's Queen H4, threatening Bishop on H5 and also threatening Queen G3, winning the game. So White can resign. If you take with the bishop, same stuff. You go Queen H4, targeting the H5 bishop and also threatening Queen F4 with a double attack. White has to resign again. And if you take with the Rook, which is the best move, you can take on C3. And then this bishop on E3 is hanging. You have to move it, and now Queen C4, and the position is extremely double-edged. The engines say is more or less equal. Black has like 100 pawns for Rook and two bishops and queen, but of course White's also one move to give checkmate, or two moves to Black's king. So that's why this position is extremely tough to understand, and I don't get it, and probably it's just impossible to understand. So, but more or less around equal. So as we were saying, Knight H5, Bishop H5, Rook G3, this is more or less equal. And if you go Queen H2, there's Queen H4, King F1, Rook takes, King takes, check, King F1 and Rook G3, attacking this bishop on E3, and after the move Bishop F2 with looks winning, there's Rook H3, Bishop H4, takes, and now after the bishop goes back to d1, then rook f4, and then another extremely difficult position to understand. You got 3 passed pawns for the piece, around equal, but in practice everything can happen, right? So after the move rook ac1, queen d8, queen h2 now played by Vincent Keymer, and now after the move king e1, white's ready to strike with g4, and suddenly black could be in trouble. So knight f6 was played by Magnus here in this position, g4, knight d7, g5, and we were all thinking that in this position it's only Vincent Keymer who can play for the win. So white's plan is going to be simple. You're going to push h4, h5, and then see how you continue. But Magnus starts creating counterplay with the move queen a5. And this point probably Keymer makes the first small mistake here in this position. So here probably he was afraid by the move queen a4. But the thing is, he can't just play h4, because now after the move queen a4, at least he's got a draw, because this queen can never escape from the files a and b. Let's say queen c2, rook c1, queen b2, and for example after the move king e1, basically white's still much better in this position. You're aiming to go h5 here, and then you can always chase the queen if you are in trouble. So, but instead, after the queen a5 move by Magnus Carlsen, Keymer plays g6, an extremely double-edged move, because after the move h6, Magnus has closed the position, and this pawn could become a weakness in the future, as we're gonna see in few moves. Now Keymer goes for the tricky move rook b1, because most of you would be saying, okay, no problem, I'm gonna protect this pawn by playing b6, and then I keep threatening these 2 pawns, c3, sorry, and a4, and just getting a free pawn, and this is gonna be extremely tasty. But the thing is, now after the move queen g3, white wins, because now there's no way of stopping queen h4 in this position and queen h6. So that's why you can't play b6. You're gonna play rook b8 here in this position, and after queen g3, as Keymer played in the game, queen d8. This is the key. You have to cover h4 square. So Keymer decided to go here for king e1, and now knight e8 by Magnus Carlsen. Probably he's intending to go for king g7, block the position here, and then later try to focus all his game on the queen side. But also is threatening to win a pawn, and this is the second mistake we could say by Vincent Keymer. This is a bit more important mistake, because now he just blundered this pawn. It was necessary to go h4. He decided to go for king d2, and now he didn't realize about the move knight f8, which is winning a pawn immediately. But his position was so great just 2-3 moves before that still, even blundering this pawn, it's going to be extremely tough for Magnus to make any progress. We're going to see how. So bishop f2 was played. We're going to say that if you go bishop h5, sooner or later, after the move rook g7, knight f6 later, this bishop has to retreat back, and then g6 gonna fall. So that's why Keymer didn't wanna go for that, and bishop f2, he admits that he's just pawn down and he's got to fight. Queen e7, Magnus not in a hurry, king e3, queen f6, forcing the king back to d2 to protect c3, and now Magnus finally takes his pawn on g6. h4 by Keymer, knight e7, queen h3, takes, and queen f7. It was not clear how to create progress here for Magnus, because Keymer is going to play h5, bishop h4. Probably Magnus has to bring this knight to f6, and later a rook to the g file, and then fight on the king side. But it's not going to be easy, as we're going to see. So h5 was played by the John German, knight f6, bishop h4, and b6. So Magnus Carlsen's plan is to go rook g8. And then if the rook moves, then knight g4. But now Keymer creates this move, rook b1, or goes for this move, rook b1, which is extremely interesting. Because now, if you go for rook g8, then there's going to be a5 here in this position, creating a lot of counterplay. Let's say after b takes a5, rook b7, and suddenly, even white's 2 pawn downs, this rook is extremely active, this bishop is also very active, f5 is a weakness, and it's not going to be easy for Magnus here. So that's why he goes for queen f8, inviting now Keymer to go a5, because if Keymer go a5, for example, this move, knight f to g8, protecting. Now removing this knight from f6. Now actually black's threatening to take on a5, right? With the knight on f6, this was not possible. So if you take on b6, now rook takes b6, and this position black is much better. So that's why Keymer decides to stay calm with the move rook g1. And it's not easy for black to make any progress. He goes for queen f7. Sorry for this long video, guys, but the game was extremely complex, and I think it's interesting to understand every phase of the game, right? So rook b1 was played, queen g7, rook g1. Now some of you at home will be saying, what is this guy doing? Queen takes e1. Well, be careful. Bishop f6 followed by bishop e7, white's better. So queen f8 was played, rook b1, sorry, king c2, knight f to g8. Magnus starts playing around, and he finally finds a plan to improve his pieces. Queen d2, sorry, king d2, queen f7, king c2, rook f8, and finally he sees this plan. He wants to bring this queen to f8, sorry, to e8, where targets the a4 pawn, and maybe later he wants to go for rook f7, rook g7, and later queen f7, knight f6, and knight g4. So king d2 was played, queen e8, and rook a1. Keymer protects the a4 pawn, and now after the move rook f7, Keymer realizes that he's got to start doing something. Otherwise, Magnus is going to improve his position just slowly. After this maneuver, rook g7, queen f7, knight f6, knight g4, and then h5 could be a weakness, right? So Keymer decides to open with a5, b takes a5 by Magnus, rook takes a5, knight c8. Now protecting a7, rook a1 by Keymer, queen f8 by Magnus, rook b1, intending to go probably rook b8. So that's why Magnus stops that by playing knight f6. And after rook g1, it looks like Magnus managed to create progress, because now he could simply push the a pawn, right? But instead he makes a mistake in this position, and he goes for the move rook g7, which is a big mistake, and then we're going to try to explain how. The reason is, after rook g7, you can't just take with the king. Otherwise, if you take with the queen, f5 would be hanging. So king takes g7, queen g3. Now only one move, king h8. You go to f7, this is just checkmate, boom! And bye-bye, sayonara, baby. King h8 and queen g6. And suddenly, black can't move this queen or knight. If you move the knight, there is bishop f6, and bye-bye. If you move the queen, let's say, to b8, trying to well, later, like create some sort of attack against white's king, there's always bishop f6 at least, and then it's gonna be a perpetual. So that's why Magnus realized that now the position is around equal. But again, these guys are extremely amazing. They have like so many resources, right? So a5 was played, bishop f1. We have to say that Keymer also has this extremely dangerous plan, related by bringing this bishop to a3 and also taking on f5 and threatening checkmate. a4 was played by Magnus Carlsen, still not possible to go bishop a3 because there's knight c4. So king c2 was played. Keymer goes, Magnus goes for a3. And now again, if you go bishop a3, there is knight c4. If you take on f5, threatening checkmate, there is knight e3, fork, and then black wins. So that's why Keymer goes for king b3 in this position. Magnus creates another trick with knight a4. You can't take on a4 because there's a2. You take on a3, well, black's gonna take on c3. But here Keymer goes for all in. Bishop a3, targeting f5. And here Magnus finds the only way to go for the win here in this position. Because if you go queen b8, king a4, a2, there's bishop f6, and again, this is gonna be a perpetual. But Magnus finds this way, queen g7, to create more troubles. So here he's threatening to take on c3, so that's why white has to take on g7. King takes, bishop f5. That's why this queen g7 was so difficult to play, because now it looks like black is blundering all his pawn. But after the move knight f6, it's just not easy for white. So king a3 was played really natural. Knight c3, and here Keymer makes the decisive mistake, because his position was completely equal after the move king b3. Because now after knight e2 there was this line, bishop f6, king f6, bishop f4, knight e4. And even though this endgame looks terrible for white, it's draw. It's equal. Because now after the move bishop f3, white has enough time to create counterplay against the d6 pawn. This endgame was the key. And this is what Keymer had to find with not so much time in the clock. Let's say after king g5, you cannot even take the pawn on h5 because even black is gonna suffer because now white arrives first, d6, d7, and now white's a pawn up. And even though if you try to go for the c4 pawn, let's say after the move king e5, king a4, knight d3, king b5, king d4, bishop e2, it's just not enough for black. And position is completely equal. So, but instead, Keymer didn't like this angle. I completely understand. It just looks even completely losing. But in the first side, right? But he goes for bishop f2. And Magnus now plays knight e2, intending to go for the f4 pawn. Keymer tries to create some counterplay. Still not easy for Magnus, because now if you take this pawn on f4 after the move king b5, again the position is around equal. There's no way of stopping the king coming to d6. If you try to go king f7, king c6, king e7, there's bishop g3, an extremely annoying move, and then the d6 pawn is gonna fall. Let's say knight h5, you got bishop h4, you go knight f6, there's bishop e4, and even white's better here in this position. So that's why knight h5 was the key, and this was played by Magnus. The key is he wants to bring this king to e7 to protect d6. And now king a5 was played by Keymer. If you go king b5, there's king f6, and you can't even take on e4 because there is a fork. So king a5 was played, knight f6 protecting e4, king b6, king f7, king c7, and king e7 by Magnus Carlsen. The key now after bishop h4 is the move e3. And black wins. So that's why Keymer decides to play bishop e3, protecting Facundo, but now knight d4 by Magnus Carlsen, centralizing the knight, attacking f5, bishop e6, and h5. Everything is under control now, so now this pawn is gonna try to run like Usain Bolt. So bishop f2, knight f3, now creating the possibility for this pawn to be pushed. Bishop f5. h4 was now a mistake, incredibly, because it was not easy to make any progress. But the move knight d4, going for the c4 pawn, it was decisive for Magnus. Okay, we have to say that you play knight g4, boom, bishop c5, and then white wins. This knight has to keep an eye on the d7 square. So knight d2, bishop h4, e3, bishop d3, knight f3, takes, king takes, h4. Now it's just impossible to play these two pawns with just one piece, so that's why Carlsen tries to create Keymer tries to promote the d pawn, but then after the move knight d4, king c8, e2, Keymer had to resign, because after the move bishop takes, knight takes, d6, knight takes Facundo, d7, knight e6, you finally stop this pawn, and then this pawn is gonna be the glorious, and then it's gonna be promoted, and Carlsen's gonna win. So an extremely interesting game. What a fight has given this young kid from Germany, Vincent Keymer, who's gonna be probably a super strong player in the future. We hope all the best for him. It was a 6.5 hours fight against the world champion. Kudos for Keymer. And today we have more action in Chess24. Remember, you can follow all the action with Jan Gustafsson and Peter Lego. You also can enjoy Spanish commentary. And this has been all. Probably I'll see you in the next video, in the next game of the day. So it's been a pleasure for me. Just remember, if you drink, don't drive. Be good. Bye bye, guys.